Picture the scene. It's 1990, you're 6 years old, your first game system is a Commodore 64, still clinging to 1980s technology, and you're used to games that, while excellent, still look like this. Then one day, you go to a friend's house for a playdate, and while you're playing with your Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, your mate turns around and says he wants to show you his big brother's new computer. And what you see is this. But was it actually any good? This is Dan, the Mega Driver of the Sega guys, and in this video we're going to look at the game first packed in with Western Mega Drive and Sega Genesis consoles. Altered Beast is a game that divides opinion, even back in the day, while in modern times it is ridiculed quite often for having a reputation of a bad game. Now there's two ways to look at it in my book. The first is as a technical showpiece, a game that showed early on what Sega's fifth home console could really do. As I said, I was used to 8-bit home micros at the time. My friend was clearly impressed by it, given the "let me show you what my big brother's just got" when taking us away from our toys and showing me what the big boys had upstairs. This was how I was introduced to Altered Beast, pre-UK launch on an import console. Huge sprites, fluid movements, and all were lavished in what seemed like hundreds of colours. Seeing Altered Beast in action was mind-blowing as a 6-year-old used to 8-bit computers. This was a full year before my brother would get a Master System and bring Sega into our home, and over 2 years before we'd get our own Mega Drive. I'd never seen anything like it outside of the arcade, and it blew my tiny little mind. And that was the desired effect. There's a reason why Sega bundled it with Western consoles, and it wasn't because of the deep narrative experience. The Mega Drive was created to bring the arcade home, especially those developed on the Sega System 16 arcade board. Altered Beast was one such game. Side by side, you can see the difference in visual effects, such as some scaling, resolution, and the use of colour, but all in all, it's a close port of what was a new game at the time. I do enjoy some of the arcade touches, such as how Neff grows in size at the start of each boss fight, how the beasts have bespoke animations like Wolf's Hadouken animation and the "Get It" text on the power up orb. Still, those differences aside, the Mega Drive port is startlingly close, closer than we'd seen on any home console for an arcade game of that complexity. In terms of sound, again, for a 1989 game, it's head and shoulders above what was around at the time. Music was bassy, clear, and with great electronic instrumentation. Speech was also impressively clear, and while the "whys from your grave" gets ridiculed today, it's both iconic and it was pretty impressive for the time. So yes, it absolutely was a technical showpiece, and it does its job in that respect. It was a great example of what Sega's console could do. But once the U and R factor was gone, what about the rest of it? So, aside from being effectively a bundled tech demo, what is Altered Beast? Well, it's a side-on beat-em-up, less of a Double Dragon Final Fight sort of game, and more akin to games like Kung Fu Master and Vigilante. You punch, kick and jump your way through hordes of enemies from the underworld through 5 stages. The hook is the ability to power up into beast forms, hence the name. Pick up one orb and you hear "power up" as your undead avatar gets buff. Get a second orb and they turn into a veritable Scott Steiner.
My arm is bigger than your leg!
Get a third orb and you transform into one of 4 creatures. And you must transform to fight the boss. If you don't, he scurries away, extending the level until you get 3 orbs, or until the third time of asking, where he'll fight you anyway. Fighting a boss in human form is interesting, but not recommended. By the way, I always found it quite comical the way how Neff, the bad guy, will only fight you when you have the best chance of winning, and kinda scurries away off screen as if he's scared of humans. Anyway, that's pretty much it. There's 5 stages, 4 beasts with the wolf repeating in stage 5 in a slightly different colour, and the whole thing will take about 15 minutes to run from start to finish. So the bad then? It's short, and it's basic, even by 1989 standards. There are very few console-specific additions to flesh out the runtime, such as additional modes or stages like future Mega Drive ports would feature. it all gives credence to it being a glorified tech demo of a pack-in. Sure, it delivered on Sega's early promise to being the arcade home, but a little more substance would have been great. Still, as long-time viewers and listeners of the Sega Guys know, we love a replayable game. Whether it's Crazy Taxi, Sega Rally, Nights into Dreams, the Sonic games, any games with short runtimes, especially Sega ones, are endlessly replayable. So does that apply to Altered Beast? On one hand, the gameplay is chunky and satisfying. Punches and kicks are responsive and great to land. When you transform, the fun factor is elevated as you decimate your enemies en route to the boss. But it's not all the sort of Sega arcade perfection you'd hope for. Some of the control feels clunky. Now I have three main bugbears with this. The first being the jump mechanics, which feel stunted. You move between a short jump and a high jump depending on how long you hold the button like normal, but there seem to be only two heights without too much precise control. The same can be said of turning, which feels sluggish. Enemies will attack from both sides, and if you're caught between two, it's nigh impossible to attack one and turn around to fight the other, meaning that you'll always take damage. More generally, enemy placement feels cheap, and foes can feel awkward to fight, especially when you're in human form, which accounts for most of the game. Damage quite often feels unfair, and the collision detection isn't great. That said, all three of these areas are actually improved over the arcade original, where jumping feels even more stunted, turning feels even more sluggish, and enemy placement is even cheaper for the most part, in a game that's designed to take as many coins from you as possible. So it seems Sega actually did make some improvements from bringing Altered Beast home. You may think it's necessary because, as opposed to shoveling in money into an arcade cabinet, you only get one credit for the home port. But that's not strictly true. Remember when I said there are very few console-specific editions? That didn't mean that there aren't any. The first is that you do have infinite continues to a degree. Simply by pressing A and start, you can go back to the stage where you died and continue playing. When you beat the game, you'll cycle back round to the first stage to begin again after the end credits, but on a higher difficulty. Wait, there are higher difficulties? Yep. Strangely, the game never overtly tells you this, but you do have access to a hidden options menu to see the difficulty levels. Pressing B and start allows you to not only select the difficulty, but set the number of lives and your starting stage too. Now remember when I said that A and start resumes where you died? Pressing B and start after a game over results in the settings for the stage and difficulty that you got to, from normal to hardest. Hardest is the arcade level difficulty, where the monsters and enemies are there in plentiful supply, but it still doesn't feel as unfair as the original game. Now, hiding fairly standard options is strange, and especially including the stage select in what would be a fairly standard options menu. So that makes the idea of a hidden menu quite quaint, really. Yes, there's an additional menu. By holding down left, ABC and start, you can choose the beast you get for each level. So if you want to be the overpowered dragon and just cheese it through every single stage, go on right ahead. And that is the closest we get to true additional content that the game has over the arcade. Sadly, it is missing things. Most notably, the ending where all the characters are revealed to be actors in costumes, all going out for beers afterwards. There was a similar type of humour in Golden Axe and Alien Storm, which was left out of those home ports too. But that's pretty much everything to say on Altered Beast. On one hand, it was absolutely mind-blowing when I saw it for the first time, especially coming from an 8-bit machine. But on the other hand, while fun, it's short and it has a few control issues which can really frustrate, with not a lot to bring you back. I finally got my own copy of Altered Beast in January 1993, shortly after getting a Mega Drive for Christmas 1992. I spent my Christmas money on the game that astounded me 3 years before. At the time, with no budget range, it was still a massive £40. After taking it home and beating it a few times, I kind of felt empty, and that amazement had evaporated completely in the intervening years, especially with games like Sonic and Street Fighter 2 dominating the scene. 30 years later, I still play it and enjoy it, despite its flaws. I suppose that's longevity to an extent. There is fun to be had. So, is Altered Beast a good game? Well, it's not an all-time classic, but it's not a terrible game either. It's good fun, it's just short and shallow with a few control issues. It does have entertainment value though, especially in 2-player mode. So good? Maybe. But important? Definitely. It was a good early indication of what the Mega Drive could do, a showpiece for early adopters, and in that respect, as a pack-in, it certainly did its job. It definitely wowed me as a kid, and a few others too. Thankfully, it can be had pretty cheap these days and accessed in a number of ways, so whether it's any good is for you to decide. All I can do is encourage you to try it out and try to view it through the lens of a 1990 child. And try to bring a friend in for some fun too. If you've made it through to the end of the video, thanks so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe for more Sega Guys content, as that really helps the channel. Check out our other content such as gameplay videos, retrospectives, our Sega Guys race, Sega Guys fight and Sega Guys podcast. You can find the Sega Guys on X or Twitter at Sega Guys. You'll find me at Swooper_D. You'll find my co-host James the Segaholic at the Segaholic. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the Sega side.